In this video, we'll introduce the practical problem that we are going to be applying the K-means algorithm on. So the file noodles retail as an Excel file that is uploaded as part of the resources for this module contains data on a noodles retail company, and it's fictitious anyway, so it's not really existing. It's just created for the purpose of this application. So their goal is that they intend to segment their current customers to be able to describe them. So they want to be able to describe each current customer segment, identify clusters of customers that have similar characteristics for the purpose of targeting different segments for different types of offers. That's in the future. So that means that the segments should be made as homogeneous as possible within themselves and heterogeneous from each other, so that the marketing or targeting campaign can be focused. So that means our goal is to be able to pick the data, that's the noodles retail data that is attached, that is that's in the resources, and see how we can convert it to segments. We want to segment that particular data. Now let's look at the steps that we will need to go through to be able to carry out this process. The first thing for any typical analytics project is data preprocessing. And so the same applies to this clustering adventure. The first thing under the data preprocessing, we need to handle missing value, because we are using K-means algorithm and it cannot deal with missing values. So if there are any few missing values, they have to be excluded. And if there are many, they have to be imputed based on how we talked about handling missing value in module 2. The next thing is data visualization. So the goal of this is, in this clustering experiment or project, is to be able to discover outliers, because we are using Euclidean distance and is sensitive to outliers too. The next thing is convert categorical to numerical if you have any of such variable in your data. So this means that Kmeans actually uses distance function and cannot handle categorical variable directly. So if it's ordinal, we explained ordinal before, you replace it with arithmetic sequence. Okay, so what we mean by ordinal is if it's low, medium, high. So you can replace low with 1, medium with 2, and high with 3. And if it's nominal, you can convert it to dummy variables, that's numerical variables in a RapidMiner. So the next step is data normalization. So distance computations in K-means weighs each dimensions equally. And so if care must be taken to ensure that the unit of dimension shouldn't distort the nearness of the observation. So that's why we have to normalize. Then the next thing is the dimensionality issue. We need to take care of that. So any more than few tens of dimensions mean that the distance interpretation isn't obvious and must be prevented. We should prevent such. So appropriate dimension reduction techniques, like we talked about earlier, for example, removing correlated attributes, can be used. That's before applying the K-means algorithm. But K-means can actually work on up to 128 dimensions if the attributes are good-natured. Now, the second step after preprocessing is to determine K, just like we explained earlier. So you determine the number of K. There are several approaches to doing this, okay? But we shall, for this experiment, we'll be using the domain knowledge. So we'll supply the K for this assignment. So we'll assume that the domain expert has given us the idea of K. So that's what we're going to use. Then for the third process, we now create this process, this clustering process in RapidMiner. So to do that, we use appropriate distance measure for distance between records. So since we are using numerical values all through, because even if we have categorical values in our data, we plan to convert it to dummy variables. So numerical measures was selected because we have converted all the attributes to numerical, and then we can easily apply those numerical measures for calculating the distance in RapidMiner. We'll be seeing how we'll do this practically in the next videos. Now, the fourth one is to validate the clusters. That's after we have been able to use RapidMiner to get our clusters, we now want to validate it. So to validate the generated clusters, we use the average within centroid distance. That you see when we get to RapidMiner, there are different measures that we can use, but we've selected the average within distance, cluster centroid distance, sorry. Well, it's an experiment. You can try other ones. Just in case you're wondering why did we select that, you can try other ones and then try to, find out how valid is your cluster, and if you get better results, you can stick with that. So to further check the stability of the clusters, we can remove 5% of the data, and then that's by taking a random sample of 95% of the records and then repeat the analysis. If the same picture emerges, then we can say that, okay, it's stable and it's validated, but we're not going to be using that for this particular, practical example. We're just going to be using the average within centroid distance, since we can get that as a function in RapidMiner. Now, the last step, that's to interpret your results. So to do that, we're going to compare the centroid, that's the cluster centroid, to characterize the different clusters and try to give each cluster a label. Then we'll try to provide an appropriate name for each cluster using any or all of the variables in the data set. So, and after that, we'll now try to answer questions like what clusters or which clusters should we target for offers, and what type of offers should we even target for this cluster. So that will be centered around interpreting our results. So usually a clustering, solution does not end, particularly if we want to use it for increasing our customer base, until we have done these major 5 steps. Let's look at what the data looks like. So we can see that we have a lot of data, we have a lot of attributes. We have both the ones that are even useful and the ones that are not useful. For example, if we look at the non-useful ones, whenever we see transaction ID, customer ID, product ID, we need to even remove it. Those are things we even remove first. So that's from our data. So before we can even actually apply it. So let's just see how the application goes. So this is a snapshot of the data in Excel. So you can open the data and actually view it. The first thing before you even start knowing whether you're going to remove missing value or know the data pre-processing, the first thing is to even view the raw data and just try to scan through it and see what's going on, look at the attributes, look at the issues that you could encounter, and then you can now examine it using the statistics in RapidMiner. And that's if you're using RapidMiner. And if you're using any other platform, you can do the same. In the next video, we will use RapidMiner to implement these solution steps.